Jenny Lee Hodgins here. I wanted to share ideas for piano practice heading straight for the goal of how to prepare a confident piano performance. How do you know when you're ready to perform a piece of music? And this is actually going to be helpful even if you have no intention of performing. Most of these tips are going to really help you move the needle forward in your piano progress through your piano practice sessions. And as I said, I wanted to start with some ideas for piano practice heading straight for the goal, which is a quote from Newhouse's from the Art of Piano Playing book by Newhouse. I'm going to share tips that really have worked for me really well and for thousands of students that I've taught in piano and chorus and music. Even if you don't want to perform, these are going to be very helpful to you, I think. And if you do want to perform or get a little more confidence playing in front of someone, these should be very helpful to you. It's about getting to a deeper level of piano practice, and it's about musical mastery under your fingers. How do you know when you are ready to perform your piano music? And I'm going to start with the idea that boundaries create a platform for really important work. And what I mean by that is, working toward mastery using very small chunks of your music from the moment you begin learning it. Start by making things really manageable for your brain and your body. So a lot of people just go too big from the get-go and they get frustrated. So think micro level small. Break things down into the simplest form so you can grasp them well, mentally, cognitively, intellectually, and physically. And when I say work toward mastering the music, what do I mean by mastery? Well, first, I highly recommend learn the music really well on the page. And as soon as possible, commit that music to your memory, even if you have no intention of performing it, because this does require a much deeper level of concentrated piano practice, and it propels your progress at the piano exponentially. So it's the opposite of what most people do at the piano, spending lots of time repeatedly running through larger chunks or even an entire music selection. Instead, you're going to the micro level, and you're going to work on small bits of music, material that you can dissect and understand it, comprehend it, and then commit it to memory. And you can't commit something to memory if you're not grasping it. So that's why chunking things down is so important when you're practicing music. And as you work on this, I recommend also doing transition work. I'm stealing this idea directly from one of our group members, fellow adult piano learner Tommy Doyle. Shout out to Tommy. He uses by the way, if you don't know who Tommy Doyle is, I interviewed him a while back on my webpage or my blog, my podcast, Your Creative Chord, and I'll try to drop the link too. And he's a really great resource for adult beginners and particularly for returning learners. From my perspective, he has some really great tips for adult piano learners. And what he talked about in that divide and conquer tutorial is how he uses small chunks or small sections of music to focus the music material from whatever he's working on. He just chooses a small chunk to focus on in a practice session. But he also, this is really important, he links that little bit of music section that you're working on to a very short transitional part of the very next section. So, or alternatively, or even in addition, he'll catch just a snippet or a beat or a measure right before that section he's working on. So these, the transition idea is a really good idea, or as the British say, it's brilliant, because once you have that little section that you've been working on kind of solidified in your mind and your fingers, try to go just a tiny bit further and see if you can round it out to the next section or start just a little bit before that. And I really agree with that idea, because once you've mastered that little piece of music, it is a good idea to work on what's coming right after it or what's happening right before it, because it helps your memory. If you get in the middle of a performance or you're sharing it with somebody and you completely zone out, if you've consistently practiced with a little bit before and a little bit after whatever you're working on, it's pretty easy to find a section to get back on the horse again. So this is also a good way to do memorization work, not just learning the music, but memorizing it. After you've memorized a little bit of the music material, see if you can go to the very next beat of the very next measure, or take the whole measure that comes right after that section, or even go from one section to the next once you get a little more involved with it, advanced with it. And like I said, or you can alternately just grab a beat right before the measure before, or a whole measure, or a few measures, or a whole section previously, that comes right before the part that you're working on. And see if you can commit that to memory, basically. So the point is, when you're starting at different places within the music, it helps you think in more detail. It helps you recall things, and simultaneously, it helps you get a much bigger picture of the full musical composition. You're not stuck in one spot. You're not stuck going from the beginning all the way to the end every single time. You've been able to chunk it down and break it up and start in different places. And this process, working like that, it's tough work. It really does take a good level of concentration, but it helps you understand the music better, and it ingrains it more fully in your memory and your muscle memory as well. Another thing that I would like to suggest if you're working towards a performance or even just wanting to learn the music is you can practice on a micro level of detail. So try recalling the music in your mind in great detail away from the keyboard. This is what I call audiation. Just hearing what it sounds like in your mind, basically. And you can spend a lot of time audiating music from memory in different ways. You can start at the piano by using your practice time to audiate or hear individual melodic lines, or let's say, listen for the right hand part in your mind while you're playing the left hand part. Or switch that, listen for the bass line or the left hand's melodic phrase while you're playing the right hand part. This takes real concentration to be able to do that, but and also you can try listening for both hands together. What does that sound like? But this kind of effort, it's something that you can't spend too much time on, because we tire when we're giving that much energy to something. But it really does go a long way to solidify that music in your mind and learning it under your fingers. Try to listen for, what do those melodic lines sound like? What does the bass line sound like? Are there any inner voices leading? Do you hear those? Can you recall them? And you can also try just listening for the chord progression. Like, how does it progress from chord to chord? What does that sound like? The tonality, the overall sound of it, the mood of it. When you practice recalling from memory what the notation looks like in your mind, that also can help you hear it. So that's another way that you can, instead of audiating, just try to recall, what did it look like? What was that fingering? What were those notes? What was the rhythm? What was that chord? Just try to remember, what does it look like? And you can practice this at the piano from the very beginning when you're learning the music. Take one measure and play whatever small chunk you want to play. You can do just one hand at a time. Play that right hand part. Stop and think about it and look at it, and then try to play it from memory on the piano. Or before you play it on the piano, try to sing it out loud. Can you hum it? Do you remember what it was? Or say the fingering out loud. Do simple things like that, step by step, inch by inch, as you're working on the music in front of you. Just recalling from memory what it is, little by little. And as I said, if you get tired with that, because it does take a lot of energy, that this is really deep work at the piano, then you can take a break, play something familiar, or play through it. Give yourself a break, or get up and walk around. Another thing that you can do to prepare yourself for a performance, besides this kind of deeper work, is to listen to really great performances of the music you want to learn or that you want to perform. And this will add a whole nother layer to your memory while training your ears to listen for an accurate and musically expressive oral picture of the music. It kind of is like having an aspirational oral vision of what you want to achieve in your performance. As I get through a piece of music, I look for as many recordings as I can to hear what other artists heard and how did they interpret it. And it just really opens my mind a bit to the whole picture of the music, the mood, the dynamics, the tempo. Helps me through parts of the music that I'm maybe getting stuck on or not quite playing accurately. It gives me a whole I mean, there's nothing like seeing how it's supposed to be done and then trying to emulate that. Seeing with your ear, basically. Another tip for you, if you're trying to develop yourself to be ready to perform something, is practice performing with a lot of distraction. I think this is a really good tip for beginners and returning piano learners who aren't used to performing, because so many students, so many adult students particularly, would tell me how they played it perfectly at home, but they messed it up in front of me, or they messed it up at our recitals and things. And I think it's because we get stuck in the mode of the only thing going on in our practice session is our music. We are not used to the distraction of other things happening in the room. And so I really recommend that you practice music with distraction. One way you can do that, very simple, is turn on the TV and ignore it and try to focus on your music. It's really hard for me to do that. Another thing you could do, or turn on a podcast or something, and just something audible, and try to not listen to it. Or allow it to be there, but stay focused on your music. Another way that you can add distraction to your practice is include performing it while the TV's on, or for your pet, or for your family member. Have like an after dinner time, or you can create a video. So learning to hone your focus on the music itself, despite all these distractions in your peripheral vision outside your piano playing effort, is a really good way to desensitize yourself to the performance arena. A lot of people are nervous about performing, and honestly, desensitizing yourself to distraction is a really good way to boost your confidence there. Another thing that you can do, but we've been talking about the micro level and real detailed, work and distracting yourself, making distractions happen while you try to stay focused. Another thing you can do to prepare yourself for performance is on the macro level. So on the bigger level, and I've talked about this before, I've done this a lot in my personal performances. Meditate and envision the details of your performance going well. Imagine the global view, not the details, but the global view of your musical performance. Instead of focusing on the musical specifics, broaden your attention to just what it feels like to perform it really well. Practice imagining how you feel performing that piece of music really well. Practice envisioning what the room feels like, what it looks like. Imagine the smells, the sights, and the sounds of the audience. Just really spend some time, imagining this. I did a lot of this as I was gigging throughout the years. I gigged for a long time as a pianist and vocalist and singer-songwriter. And before I would do a gig, I would practice my pieces through each set of music, like 45-minute sets, taking a little break in between. And I would imagine all of this. Okay, I'm playing through the music, but I'm imagining the room, the crowd, the sounds, what it's like. Just because it desensitized me to, once I was there, I kind of knew what to expect. Even better if you can go to that venue and kind of check it out, so you know what's there. When you're envisioning this, imagine a really positive audience reception to your playing. Imagine how confident you feel and how much you're really enjoying the music, how much the audience is enjoying it. So you can practice playing it from memory like I described while using this envisioning tactic, so you can feel as if you're performing it during your practice. Imagine that you're in that performance scenario while you're playing the music. So using imagery and meditating and envisioning your performance, these are all very well research proven tactics that athletes use to be, and they're incredibly effective toward successfully reaching a goal or improving or creating a strong performance. Talk to any athlete, they imagine over and over and over again the goal that they're trying to reach, and I'm certain that they break down what do I feel like? How confident am I? What does it sound like? How do I feel at the keyboard, for example? So go into detail about that in your mind. Spend some time, if you're working towards a performance, not just working on those micro musical details that I mentioned at the start, but think about the broader view, and just really, this goes a long way towards boosting your confidence. Just really envisioning a successful performance, what it feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what's there. Don't leave any anything up for surprise. If you can, go to the venue you're going to perform in and be with that environment, and get used to it, get used to what it sounds like, feels like. Many people, when they have a performance and they don't perform very often, the slightest distraction freaks them out, and then they lose their focus at the piano. So these tips, practicing distraction, practicing envisioning the details of your music, practicing the bigger view of your own musical mastery and your own confidence and the enjoyment of the audience and the joy of the music. These things go a long way, towards preparing yourself for a really confident and enjoyable performance. And it shouldn't just be about technique, or even the structure of the music itself. It should be kind of a more holistic approach to your performance. And this is what I call the practice of performing. So you don't just learn your music and think you're ready. You practice what it's like to perform. And a lot of that is simply envisioning it. And the other part of that is honing that focus through distractions. Give yourself distractions so you're used to it. And the more you practice something, obviously, the better you're going to get at it. Break it down into as many chunks of opportunities to perform as possible. So if you're new to performing or you're nervous about performing, there are lots of things that you can do that aren't like the big performance. Like you can perform by recording yourself. Just adding that extra, distraction of pushing a record button puts you under the pressure of getting it right, getting through it at least. Instead of just hurling yourself into a big performance without having any practice, use these tips that I've mentioned. And also, as I said, break down the practice of performance into as many chunks of opportunities as possible. For example, call a friend and have them listen on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom it. Have them listen to you. That adds a whole nother layer of being able to do something with that distraction. As I mentioned before, have music time with your family or your husband or your wife or whatever after dinner. Make it an opportunity for you to play something, and don't just play what you're practicing. Play something that you've been working on in preparation for a performance. I recommend doing that. Don't try to do something that you're not quite confident with. Do something that you've really been focused on getting ready to perform. Another thing you can do is volunteer to record or play something for your spiritual community. And if you're nervous about getting up on the stage, then pre-record it, because then you can do it as many times as you want and cut all the takes that you didn't like. You can edit it. Another thing that I highly recommend, and I've done many, many times, it's one of the dearest memories I have of my performance career so far, is playing for retirement communities. I used to take all of my students, my chorus performances were always at retirement communities during the holidays, because to me it was win-win. It was lifting up the seniors in the community, as well as teaching I've taught elementary students, so it was teaching them community service and an appreciation of the point of music, is to share joy, to communicate with others. So if you've got a little, retirement center in your community, just volunteer to go there and play on the piano, or just go there and ask the activity director, can I just go play the piano for a minute? You can ease into it, just doesn't have to be announced. And I guarantee you're going to see some of those seniors trickling down to listen, and they will enjoy it. Another thing you can do to give yourself a small chunk of an opportunity to desensitize towards performing is play for your pet. If it's, if it's hard to play for people yet, play it for your pet. Another thing I highly recommend and encourage you to do, and hope that more people will start doing this, is to drop a recording or set up a live video with me inside the New and Returning Piano Learners Facebook group, because this is where you're going to get constructive feedback from a really safe, supportive community. It gives you practice, and it inspires other people to see that. It shows us what we can learn for ourselves, and we're going to support you. We're the best audience you can have, because we're all in the same boat. We all want to do exactly what you're doing, improving at the piano. So if you have any, performance anxiety, simply doing something frequently will, by default, desensitize you to that anxiety, and it will help improve your skills as a performer. So look for ways that you can desensitize. That's one of the tips I have for you for improving your confidence and being ready to perform. How do you know when you're ready to perform? The first thing that you need to ask yourself is, have you done the work? Because in my experience, for myself and for the thousands of piano students and music and chorus students that I've taught, the number one reason that I or my students did not do well at a performance or were extremely nervous for a performance is because we had not prepared well. That is 99% really of the work you need to do. So go back to the beginning of this live if you missed some of those tips on how to go deeper and get it ready. But remember, mindless repetition of a piece of music or music repertoire that you're working on, it's not solid preparation for a performance. Because when you're under nerves, if you haven't done the deeper cognitive recall, the memory work that I talked about at the beginning, as soon as you get a little bit distracted or nervous, that stuff goes. So you really do have to prepare well, do the work. You might be ready to perform if you've prepared yourself well through meticulous, consistent practice and regularly employing the tips that I mentioned today. You're going to have a solid foundation of playing through your pieces with so much more confidence because you did the work. And your fingers will remember it, and your brain will remember it, and your ears remember it. So it's kind of like multi-layered preparation. And most people never really feel ready to perform because nerves are normal. So if you've done that work and you're still feeling, I don't know if I'm ready, I'm really nervous, I really encourage you, take the plunge in those little micro chunks. If you've performed really well, you're going to gain tremendous insight into areas that need more attention for your music progress by performing. And preparing for and practicing piano performance really will chip away at any anxiety that you have about it. It's going to deepen your confidence. It's going to improve your performance ability dramatically. If you're a little nervous about it, I recommend take those baby steps, break it down into chunks, and do some of those suggestions that I made in the tips today. What do you think? What do you think of the ideas that I shared today? Do you think that will help you feel a little more confident towards your performance? Do you have any questions about preparing for a performance or knowing when you're ready to perform? Do you have any specific concerns about that in your own, where you are in your piano playing journey? Let me know, drop that in the comments. And if you've got more tips on this topic, please let us know that too in the comments, because we can absolutely learn from each other. I really hope this was helpful. Please do let me know if it was by leaving me a comment below. I see Sheila here, late but live, yay. And Tina's live, good to see you. Well, she's asking me what type of meditation do I do? Well, I do a couple kinds of meditation, and honestly, that sounds like it's not related to piano, but it really is in my case. First of all, I'm a practicing SGI Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist for 35 years, and it's basically a philosophy of spiritual optimism, about bringing out my best potential and sharing it with others and looking for that best potential in other people. So I definitely incorporate everything I learn and practice from my Buddhist philosophy and practice. I use that right at my piano and as I approach the piano, and particularly towards performance. And that's just one aspect of meditation that I do, the Buddhist practice, which is kind of an active vocal meditation. We actually chant the words Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and sit still and just chant it for a while. So if you want to learn more about that, go check out sgiusa.org. Give you more detail. But I used to have debilitating stage fright. Even talking like this would have freaked me out. And so my Buddhist practice has taught me through my chanting and through my philosophy of Buddhism and the meditation aspects of it, it taught me to focus not on me, but on the message of the music or the beauty of the music or the appreciation of the music, and on how I can use that music and my skills as a musician to encourage other people. So I've learned that approach from my Buddhist practice, and it never fails me. If I'm nervous, I reiterate that in my mind. I chant about it. And it also has always ignited my performance to be much more confident and focused and energetic. And so the other kind of meditation that I do has nothing to do with Buddhism. It's just kind of lends itself a little bit towards the ideas that I talked about earlier in this live when I talk about envisioning, or using imagery. Some of the meditation I do is I just simply use Audible. I used to use Headspace app. Now I have Audible, and I just download some meditations, and sometimes I'll listen to them at night. The meditation I use for performance sometimes is simply to use a very short 10, even 5-minute meditation to calm my breathing and to imagine, like I described in this video earlier, to imagine the performance going really well, how confident I feel, how joyful I feel, how grateful I feel, how I want to heart, connect through the music to my audience. Meditation is, in my mind, just using those skills of imagery or envisioning a goal that athletes use when they're trying to train for something or reach a goal or towards a game or something that they're trying to win at. I use meditation in that way to literally paint a picture. So I hope that answered that question. Tina, let me know if that makes sense. Sheila says, when you know you have, my question was, how do you know when you're ready to perform? And Sheila's answering here. When you know you have it down, you have it down. And when you don't have a panic attack thinking about it. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And the tips that I shared today hopefully will knock both of those two things off your list. You won't be panicking, and you definitely will feel more that you've got the mastery of the music under your fingers and in your ears and in your mind. So great little summary there. Love it, Sheila. And then Tina says, what if the piano you practice on isn't the one you perform on? I did a live on this a while back, and I did a blog on it too. Because the reality is, as piano players, we get what we get when we walk in. Unless you cart, like I did sometimes, a digital keyboard with you on a particular gig, you're going to end up playing whatever's there. And that's an awesome thing. I mean, because basically, we're not flute players. We can't just pack that up and take it with us. So we have, you can look at it two different ways. As piano players, we have a disadvantage because we get what we get when we get there. Whatever instrument is available is what we're going to play. But I find that an advantage because it's one of those distractions that the more you do it, the more you're able to, kind of cut out the clutter of the distractions that don't matter and really focus on the music. And the live that I did a while back about this topic was basically my experience of that and how I approach each keyboard as an experience and a personality unto itself. It's very unique and individual. So some piano keys I've played on were beautiful Steinways, beautiful Yamahas, Baldwins, and others were just pieces of junk that were not in tune, that had sometimes even the ivories or the plastic missing from the keys. The pedals were sticking or didn't work or clicked. So what I've learned is, there's going to be all kinds of scenarios. Now, hopefully, if you're working with a piano teacher, they're not going to throw you into a scenario where you don't have a good instrument to play on. But it still is a different instrument than you're used to. And so I recommend, go back to the beginning of this if you missed it and work on some of those distractions that I mentioned, employ that into your practice. And if you can, like I said, go to different places and check out the different instruments and try to give yourself the opportunity to go places. But, I recommend recognize that it's going to feel different. It's going to sound different. Just embrace that. Just like life changes and we have to get used to that and deal with that pivot and move forward. It's kind of reminds me of jazz music. Herbie Hancock, who's a great jazz pianist, one of my mentor idols. He grew up with Miles Davis, another incredible jazz great trumpeter. And when Herbie Hancock joined Miles' band early days, and he was really young, he played a mistake. He played the wrong note. It wasn't anywhere near the key they were in, and he was horrified at his mistake and scared to death because they're live performing, improvising on stage. And Miles, his mentor, took that note and wrapped his trumpet around it and made it into something complete. They went in a completely different direction that no one had seen coming, no one anticipated. And Herbie's message about that is that's life. Life can change on a dime. And if you make a mistake as a jazz player, you just make something from that. And I think it's the same thing when you're approaching a different keyboard. You make what you can out of it and just roll with it. And if it doesn't make a sound, then you embrace, okay, this one doesn't make a sound there, but I'm gonna keep going. So I hope that helps, because if you can at all get practice on the instrument that you're going to perform on, as I mentioned, try to go to the venue and try to practice on it. That will help a lot. But if you can't, then just embrace it's going to be a little different. It's okay. And I think that makes you a better player. I think it makes you piano players stronger, because we don't have the luxury of always having the same instrument wherever we perform. And that keeps us on our toes. It keeps us growing. So I hope that helps answer that question. And Sheila's telling me, yes, really great ideas, that drawing a blank during a performance is totally devastating. Drawing a blank during a performance can be totally devastating, but honestly, it happens, and you're human. And even if you're too shaky to find your place somewhere, having done all the tips, and I don't think you'll have that situation if you do these tips about the micro level detail that I talked about at the beginning in preparation. I don't think you're going to have a complete blank. And if you do, if you've done those tips at the beginning of this presentation, you're going to be able to come back in, find your way. But even if you can't, and I've done that before where I just have completely blanked on something, then if I have to, I'll start completely all over again. People understand, and it's okay. Life goes on. Don't worry about it. So, I just don't want people to get hung up on making mistakes, because the more mistakes you make, the more you grow, the better you get at stuff. So don't let that hold you back from, trying to perform something, is my point. I'm going to wrap it up, and I will see you next Tuesday, 1 p.m. ET, with some ideas on how you can compose at the piano. If you've got something you want me to talk about, let me know, and I'll see if I can wrap my head around it. Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful to you today. Have a great week. Bye.